Comes in the name of the Lord. Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. 1 in 8 couples struggle with fertility and are often given advice on the options they should try in order to have a family. In this new book, the options of foster care, in vitro fertilization, and adoption, including international, domestic, and embryo adoption, are all chronicled. In heartfelt detail, our next guest documents the toll she and her husband have experienced along the way, leading them to file for bankruptcy. This book provides a realistic understanding of the systems, procedures, and breakdown of costs someone faces when looking at alternative ways to start a family. Chrissie Kahan has been an educator for 17 years, teaching elementary school for 6, then being an elementary school assistant principal for 10. Her struggle with infertility led her to become an author after she lost her foster daughters. Since then, she's written 6 books, 3 for kids, covering topics such as anxiety, anger management, and autism, as well as 3 for adults. She now lives in Florida, where she's a Title I teacher and instructional coach for other teachers in private schools. Here to talk about her new book, Baby Bankrupt, You Did Not Get the Baby, is Chrissie Kahan, and that's spelled Kahan. Chrissie, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Chrissie, your journey, which we began with you in 2017, when you came out with your first book talking about your journey and the struggle that you and your husband had trying to conceive and all the processes you went through. And I remember watching an interview with him, so humble, so supportive, talking about the injections and his part of things, but just his heart for you was for something that actually both of you were involved. It was kind of the perfect storm of his physical situation, count, and motility. There you go. And your,
Yes.
I don't. How do you put it?
It's double infertility.
Well, a hostile environment for incubation, if you will. Just your body looking at it as not responding to it as life, but reacting to it almost autoimmune, if you will, to being able to attack it as opposed to nurture it. And so it's a plumbing, wiring kind of situation. And how could you know as you're looking at a mate, as you're looking at a husband, and how could he know? And so you began down this path together. Talk about the early years, the newlyweds, and planning for a family, and what the anticipation was that you went into this marriage with.
Sure. So, I think it's such a blessing when you feel like you finally found your soulmate and you get married and you're in the honeymoon stage. And so many couples, try to plan for when they want to conceive. Is it the right time? Am I okay financially? And so pretty early on, we, decided we wanted a family, a little, version of the two of us. We're both in education. And so we started trying. After 6 months, nothing was happening. And again, we were in that honeymoon stage, so it really should have been. And I actually had to fight for my doctor to order a sonogram to see if anything was wrong, because doctors will just tell you, give it time, your insurance might not cover it. And so it did turn out I had a uterine fibroid that was the size of a coconut. And my husband had varicocele, which are varicose veins in his testicles. And the only side effect of that was infertility. So, of course, we thought once we got those issues resolved, we would be able to conceive. Now, in my faith, I've always been a very strong Christian. I believe that God has everything happen for a purpose. And so if we could not conceive, we always were going to look at adoption through foster care. It was never, it had to be our blood. So after the surgeries, when my doctor wanted to start me on IVF, I was very skeptical. And I said, no, there are so many kids out there that need parents. And that's really when we started on the adoption process and turned to foster care.
In this process, what were you thinking God was trying to do? What did you feel like He was saying? All right, there's so many needy children out there, and you two have such giving, devoted hearts to me that you are my choice to parent these children.
Yeah.
That adding, if you weren't, how can I say this, prideful or so enamored with your own genetics,
Yeah.
that you had to pass them on. And, and our audience knows, but you and I talked about this 3 years ago, that I never wanted to be a parent, a father. I never wanted to have a child. I felt that there was nothing in my upbringing that I cared to pass on, and I'm Jewish, and you're raised to continue, but I just didn't feel that based on my relationship with my father and who he was, and that would I be like him, and
Right.
I didn't want to take that chance. And genetically, there wasn't anything that I felt that needed to be passed on. My cousins were concert pianists and sang with Luciano Pavarotti and traveled the world with him, and the head of the New York Ballet Company, and they were artistically created. And I can see where he would say I would want to pass on the gifting, but we were the audience. We bought tickets.
Right.
So raising a bunch of ticket buyers, isn't really building the kingdom. So I just never had any desire. And, in my late 30s, the opportunity to adopt was dropped in my lap. I had 6 weeks notice.
Wow.
And made the decision that and I wasn't a believer, but this was a good time in my life. I was very financially well off, and could take 3 months off and be a stay-at-home dad and have this experience of a lifetime. So I took advantage of it, and she's just given me a beautiful baby granddaughter, and she's 5 months old now, and I was just down with them, and they're in Florida. They're up in Navarre. And,
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's just a very tremendously close relationship, and bonded with the baby, and we FaceTime all the time, the baby and I. So it's really extraordinary. But I had that feeling that there wasn't anything that I was so enamored with. But he had this child picked out, and she looks just like me.
That's amazing.
She has my feet. She has my eyes. She has my facial structure. Every picture we have together, everybody says, "Well, of course it's your daughter."
Mm-hmm.
So you and your husband tried in vitro for a period of time, but even that was not successful.
Right. So after, and just like you, I did think God already had my children out there, and maybe I was supposed to be their mom. And I really felt like the youngest of the two girls I had, both had disabilities, behavioral issues. The youngest I really felt like was my baby. And in fact, I have dedicated my book to her, because I was not okay with the treatment she was given in the foster care system. And that's why I advocated for her and ultimately lost her. But if she's ever reads any of my books, I want her to know she was my daughter in my heart. I pray for her every day, and I love her very much. And I know God is looking over her. So after our experience with foster care, when we realized just how important it is to a system for a child to be your blood, that's when we started trying IVF. And we did do 4 rounds of IVF with my same fertility specialist who did my surgery. We had 2 miscarriages. And just that, like, finally, after all the years, getting that positive pregnancy test and thinking this is it, only to have my body betray me a couple weeks later, was devastating. And so that was a different kind of pain. But I'm so lucky that I have my husband, because most of the things we've encountered would have broken most couples. You know, we say we're in it good, bad, and ugly, and we've really had a lot of ugly, but it's made our marriage stronger, and that has really been a testament to our faith.
All these processes, how did you afford them?
That's a great question. I think any woman who has a goal, especially like I'm a very independent, determined young lady. And in fact, I was a preemie. I was not supposed to be here. All the doctors told my mom I wasn't going to make it. And, you know, kind of God's will in me, here I am. So once I decided I wanted to be a mom, I was going to do anything and everything. I had very good insurance because I was an assistant principal. But even with that, it started to take a toll. And you don't realize, you know, like with foster care, the girls came with nothing. So we really had to buy their wardrobes, their rooms, everything, and starting to use credit cards and loans, and then going through IVF. You know, insurance pays a good portion of it, but still, as I talk about in my book, you know, you're going for visits every week at $30 a copay. It starts to add up. And so 4 rounds of that, we were probably about $20,000 in debt at that point.
And I think we had the same conversation. The cost of adoption for me was about $35,000. I had to have updated background, FBI background check, but I currently had a clearance, so that wasn't really that difficult. It was just a electronic file review to see whether or not I had done anything to jeopardize my security clearance that I had with the government, and the local sheriff's office to say that I was a good citizen. But then the social workers got involved, and the adoption agency got involved, and a lawyer got involved. And in California, you can't take a child direct. It has to go through an agency, and the rights given to the agency, and then the agency places with you, and the mother has, she can't change her mind, but the agency can. And so you're in this place where you're waiting to file. You filed, and there's this delay. And in our case, the delay was a 6-month delay trying to find the father in order to terminate his rights. And although the mother, and it was a fictitious name she had given on the birth certificate, so there really wasn't a person that we were searching for in the military database, saying that, and under an old World War II law, you can't terminate someone's parental rights in the military unless they are personally notified through the Adjutant General's office. So here she said he was in the military, so we had to go through all the Defense Department branches to try to find this person. He wasn't in the Navy, he wasn't in the Army. But the research that was involved, and so $35,000 later, we finally get into a courtroom. And I remember when the judge said, this child is yours, that it was 9 months of wondering if today was the day that I was going to lose. You bond with them.
You do.
It doesn't matter if you think they're temporary, they're permanent.
Right.
You can't withhold. It's not the environment. So you went through in vitro, didn't work, and you decided to get into the foster care system. How does one go about that?
So we did foster care before IVF, and it really felt like God was laying it out, because at my school, I had a situation where a parent had to come see me, and she was a foster parent. And I just said, if I wanted to be a foster parent, how would I go about that? And she gave me the name of the agency she worked with. And so I got in touch with them, and we started the 26-hour training, the background check, like you said. They also have to do a home study. It's so extensive, and they have to come review your house and tell you what you need. So it takes about 3 to 4 months to get all that done. And then they can place you with a child at any time. So you could have no notice. And we actually had a couple of disappointments before we got the call for the 2 girls who were 5 and 7. And I had 2 days. And then they were going to be ours. And the foster care agency told us that the grandparents had rights, and those rights were going to be terminated. So we assumed, they were just ours, because we had been in it for adoption. But with the agency we were with, they also had to answer to the state agency, Department of Social Services. And 2 weeks after we had the girls, we were told they were going to try to reunite with the mom who had been convicted of second-degree child abuse for my youngest. And my youngest had not seen her in 2 years and had trauma. We were having to go see a trauma therapist, and it was just detrimental to our health. So after IVF, everybody, like in my church and a lot of my faculty members, some had adopted internationally and said, you should look into international adoption, because you could adopt from China. You could get a child with, a disability that could be medically easily fixed in the United States. So I started to research that process. We had to have another agency, a local one, and then an international agency. So I began doing the research for that.
Is there an advocate out there? Is there somebody who, you're one now, but what resources were available to you through the church or through any of the Compassion International or any other organization that facilitates these kind of adoptions or foster care programs?
Right.
I know that I've testified in court. I have worked with many guardian ad litems in legal situations where families of the congregation were involved. But I've also seen the other side of it, which are career foster people that work for the system and have 6 or 8 foster children, and that's how they make their living. There's a bounty, if you will, being paid for this. And the system, at least here, is just as archaic as it was 40 years ago when it was implemented. So it's not really updated, at least not here. No. Maybe it is where you are.
Oh. No, in fact, 80% of kids in foster care end up in prison later on. And what I found, actually what I talk about in my book, Baby Bankrupt, is I break down by state the amount a parent can get who fosters and the amount of kids they can have. And actually, some states it equals more than a teacher's salary. And so what we found with our experience in Maryland is they really didn't want the foster parents who wanted to love and adopt kids as their own. They wanted the foster care parents who were going to kind of just shut up and take the check and do what they were told. And that was just something I'm never going to be built for. And so seeing the injustices in the foster care system was really enlightening. I was very lucky. In my parent community, I had access to a senator and a councilman, Senator Klossmeyer and Councilman Marks. They were amazing with their support, and they actually got me a meeting with the head of social services at that time. Now, my church, they were welcoming in a whole different way. Not many people know what it's like to go through the foster care system, but they welcomed the girls and really, really supported us emotionally with all the fallout and everything we went through.
So you finally get these foster kids in your home, and your intention is to adopt them.
Yes.
So you're now receiving a subsidy from the county, and you get news that how long were they with you?
They were with us for 5 months.
For 5 months. And that's enough time to bond and to love, and you get news that they're being taken back. They're being reintegrated into their families, and so your time is done. Did they offer other additional children to you?
Well, actually, what happened is because my youngest, her mental health was fading as they pushed visitation with the mom, and the visits that we witnessed in the Department of Social Services were so detrimental. She was actually re-traumatized, and I felt like rules were being broken. So it was because of my advocacy where I asked for a meeting, and I was more concerned about her rights, that 2 days after that meeting, they actually just took the girls. They were not reintegrated with the parent. They were placed in another home. In fact, I told them, if you take my youngest out of my care, she will be put in a mental health institution. And she was. 2 months later, they've been with 4 different foster families. And so it is now only after, a couple years, 18 months, that they're able to be up for adoption. So kids in foster care really have to be in the system for at least 18 months before their rights can be terminated.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just can't even imagine that. So at this point, you've invested. You've invested in vitro. All right. So those bills are still there. You're trying to pay those off. The funds you're receiving from the county aren't really. You're using those to care for the children, and you're making up for the deficit because they came with 2 outfits and they need clothes, and so you're out there buying them clothes and doing all the things that a parent would normally do, with the vision of them being permanently placed with you. And so that's a non-recoverable expense.
Yes.
So here you and your husband are deeply invested in the pregnancy, the in vitro, the miscarriages, the cost of going through all these other programs, and now you're faced with a financial challenge of how are we going to pay for all of this. We're talking with Chrissie Kahan, author of Baby Bankrupt. You did not get the baby, with a price tag of $34,725 spent, and you did not get the baby.
Nope.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back from break, we're going to dig into some of the ways to navigate
Yes.
some of the ways to anticipate and some of the ways to negotiate so that you don't face this uninformed challenge that 1 in 8 women face in the area of infertility and trying to build your family. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of 2 Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Chrissie Kahan, author of Baby Bankrupt. You did not get the baby. Money spent, $34,725. Chrissie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Chrissie, this actually did put you into bankruptcy.
Yes, it did.
And you two are solid citizens. You two are rock solid in your faith. You two are regular contributors to your community. How did it feel when the challenges became so insurmountable in your pursuit of becoming parents that you finally realized it was more than you could bear and that God had a different path He wanted you to take, and that was down the path of what you and your husband do best, is educate.
Yeah.
And there's an old expression that teachers teach because they can't do.
Yes.
It's an old adage. Teachers teach because they can't do it. Well, it's kind of interesting because back then it was in a negative slant.
Right.
Now, in your case, it happens to be an extremely positive because you're teaching parents out there that have a desire as to what the pitfalls are and where the traps are and where the underground sandbar is and where the rocks are and how to navigate through this and how to tabulate, calculate through this so that you can be prepared. You and your husband weren't prepared.
No, we were not.
And there wasn't anybody to really speak into your life to prepare you, because these counselors they're employed to do their job. And their job is to get these kids into the system and through the system until they can get them out of the system. And even though the system contributes to most of the juvenile incarcerations and to a high rate of recidivism, that any young and to illiteracy. It's the single largest contributor to illiteracy in America, and people don't realize that these foster parents are not necessarily educators, and they may homeschool, which is coloring books.
Yes.
It doesn't meet any of the standards. So tell me about Baby Bankrupt, how you structured it, what you included in it, and why you chose what you chose to include in it, because there's quite a bit of technical, embryonic, fertility-related, gynecological, obstetrics, and more than I want to know.
My dad too.
Yeah. Me and your dad you're probably pretty close to the same age.
Right.
And there's some things in here I just don't want to know about. And
I get it.
I've lived 68 years without knowing about it, and apparently I didn't need to know. So, but help us understand the book itself.
My first book, Navigating the Road of Infertility, it was really emotional. It focused more on, my husband and I, how we felt, what we went through with losing the girls. This book, I really wanted to not be as emotional, but still recognize like the roller coaster you feel as you go through each option. So the way I structured it is each chapter is titled with advice that most people give couples going through infertility. So, one of the titles is Just Adopt Already, or There's So Many Unwanted Kids. A lot of people comment and think that they know, and you see stories on Facebook that are like, oh, adopted 5 kids, and it looks so lovely. But people don't realize the process and the cost that goes into each option. So with each chapter is titled with a piece of advice. I talk about, how it played out for us. And then I go through the process for each option. For foster care, I talk about the training. For adoption, I talk about the process. So like for international adoption, I also include the forms that we were given, because people also don't realize the mound of paperwork that comes with each option along with the cost. So I really wanted everybody to know, when you're giving that piece of advice, this is really what that means. This is how long it takes time-wise. This is the amount of paperwork you have to do. And then this is the financial cost it takes on the couple.
In identifying these various steps, could I use this as a handbook to navigate the whole process, to understand each aspect of it? Is it more for the woman? Is this something that she can explain to her husband, or do they read it together?
You can do it either way. It depends on the spouse and how involved he is. Most husbands actually don't do the shots or, that part of it. My husband was very involved. He did all of that, thank God, because I couldn't do my own shots. And he really navigated for me the doctor lingo, which was hard to understand in each appointment. But I would use it more for any couple that wants to know a realistic view of what to expect. So, like the IVF chapter, I put in the calendars we had, the cost of the medications, the cost of each visit, because what we learned in our final round, because you feel a lot of shame and guilt, like especially having with infertility anyway, but then having to file for bankruptcy. And so oftentimes your fertility center will tell you at the counter, oh, this is what's due. And I remember the first couple times just like hustling to get a credit card out to give them the payment because I didn't want to stand there and, not have it. Whereas the last round, I was like, okay, no, what is this for? I thought this was covered. I need to speak to someone in billing because I've given up all credit cards since. So I wasn't going to, spend frivolously just because someone said I owed something.
As people weigh the various options, what are the realistic expectations of adoption today? Because we don't, and I think we talked about this. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, we had orphanages.
Yeah.
There was an orphanage up the street from where I grew up. I mean, that was just something that you saw, was an orphanage. Right. I don't remember from the 70s on seeing a building called an orphanage.
Right.
So where did those kids go? I guess that's where the foster care system came in. Said, look, we're not going to, we can't afford. United Way, I guess, was one of the benefactors and other charity organizations. So are there no grants? Are there no funding support? Are there no foundations that you can get support from the Bill Gates Foundation or the the Jeff Bezos Foundation or the Jeffrey Balmer's Foundation that
right.
that may have a heart or experience with this, where money is going in to support these efforts? Are there churches? Are there community or advocacy organizations that help offset the cost, or does the couple bear the cost? Because, and I've said this before, I had to go through intense parenting training.
Yeah.
All my neighbors were contacted. My home visits were not always scheduled.
No.
But they took place. I think I probably, because of my position and because of my clearance, was left alone a little bit more so than maybe the average couple, because I was a defense contractor and was in a strict classified environment in California. So, maybe that was kind of the why we were able to get things done so quickly. But that's a rarity. That's an unusual. Yeah. Six weeks to bring a baby home is just not normal. But is there help out there?
There is. What I found, though, is it's so overwhelming navigating that. So really, what I ended up finding was the best resources kind of came from within whatever agency you were working with. So for the international adoption, we had been given a referral to Catholic Charities as our local, and then had to try, they really helped connect us to the international adoption. And kind of like you were saying, it has evolved over time. So where people used to be able to adopt from Russia, or Ukraine, it's not so anymore. So really our options were we could adopt from China or we could adopt from Vietnam. And I put all that in my book because each country has different stipulations that they can say, okay, if you're not married for 10 years, you're automatically out. For us, after we did all the paperwork, because we didn't have $80,000 in assets, and I have depression and my husband has anxiety, we were ruled out of that option. So thankfully, another friend referred us to a domestic agency, which was American Adoptions. And within their site, they have different options for like financial support. There are a ton of grants and applications you can fill out there. However, what I realized is that's just more people kind of wanting to take your money. I remember trying to apply for a couple and it was like $50 to even turn the application in. And so it's really important to try to work with whatever agency you have, and they will go through a financial check with you, and you want to be realistic about your budget. You know, at the time I remember saying, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll get because it was $53,000 for traditional adoption, which I found out meant white babies, and $45,000 for agency assisted, which is, Black or Hispanic. And even that, I mean, they break it down the cost for you, but you have to be realistic about what you can afford.
When you went to file for bankruptcy, was the judge agreeable to discharging?
Yes. So we had an amazing attorney, again, connected to us through we've been very open about our journey the whole way through. And just because in the beginning of my journey, someone said, well, you're not going to tell people when you're pregnant again, right? What if you have another miscarriage? And I said, if I do, I want people to know, because I don't want people to feel like they can't talk about this. So we've put everything out there, and our friends and family have been so supportive. We had an amazing bankruptcy attorney, and she helped guide us through the paperwork. And we ended up getting a very good judge. And it takes a couple months and for you to even get your court date. And but once you do, we felt so much better, and it kind of like was a fresh start. And for me, it was like, okay, I'm now 38. I'm not where I wanted to be in life. I filed for bankruptcy. You know what? My peace is more important. So I'm now going to cast aside my 6-figure salary, and I'm going to move to the place that I love to find my peace again.
In accepting the finality of where you are, have you given up?
Do you ever? I mean, I think that's the thing about my faith is I feel like God put this desire to be a mom in my heart. If God didn't want me to be a mom, he would take it out. It's still there. It's stronger than ever. I am a big advocate for turning your mess into your message. Like Joyce Meyer always says, I feel like that's what I'm doing. But I think for the first time, I'm not trying to pick an option of how I think it's going to happen. I've really turned it over to God. They say time heals all wounds. I still, feel the pain of not having the little girl I felt was mine. But I feel like my child could be out there. And the great thing about this is it's kind of opened my eyes to there are teenagers in foster care that don't get forever homes. And I've ended up moving down here where the foster care system is a little bit better. So who knows? Maybe my child is a 13-year-old in Palm Beach County. Who knows? Maybe one of the families I work with are going to say, hey, I can't take care of my baby. Let me terminate rights and give it to you. I think in giving up, I'm more open to the way God wants to make me a mom than the traditional way you think you're going to be a mom.
Did you find that once you accepted the end of a season of aggressive pursuit,
Yeah.
Fearless, Xena, warrior, princess pursuit of this, and wound up with the finality of bankruptcy. That kind of was the end of that chapter, closing that checkbook, closing that part of the pursuit. And you and your husband decided to relocate to Florida, apply for jobs down in the area. Was it easy for you to find a new job?
Oh, no, it was not. Again, I kind of typecast where I thought I wanted to be. I've been in public education my whole life. I was an assistant principal. And so I, of course, applied for that. Florida is kind of like you have to be in the system to be considered. So I made the mistake of taking the first teaching job I was offered in public education. And I had administrators that didn't want me to smile at kids or build relationships. And I knew that wasn't for me. And so I applied to work with a company where I can do professional development for teachers, coach them how to be educators, and work in intervention. And so God kind of led me to the right place. And now I'm working with private schools, and it's amazing. So it's just different experiences I, never thought about before. But once I opened myself up to it, here I am.
And what about your husband?
So my husband actually got the perfect job for him because as a result of this journey, he did experience some difficulties with addiction, which we've gone through. I talk a little bit about it at the end of the book. And so he actually is a companion to a 22-year-old autistic young man. It's 2 blocks from our house. It's the perfect job for him, and he has not been happier.
So he's kind of a caregiver.
Yeah.
Which is actually we have a monthly show on hope for caregivers and how the caregiver needs to take care of themselves.
Absolutely.
Because they're always pouring out, and that's really quite interesting. So where are you on this continuum? Your day-to-day living out life, praying, going to church. You found a good church home.
Yeah.
And still believing God that He's going to bring a child, and no longer the swaddling clothes, no longer the 3-year-old, no longer the has to meet my standards. It's not my will be done, but your will be done.
Absolutely. So I'm giving myself some time. We wanted to be here kind of a full year before we consider anything else. Unlike everything before, like you said, I was Xena warrior princess, on to the next option. So I do think I'm going to attend a foster care training in Palm Beach this summer and just see, if it's different and what they have to offer, and, go from there.
Are you, have you picked up a second language yet?
Not yet.
So that's something that in South Florida, of course, Spanish is going to be a definite benefit.
Yeah.
In working with that, and with your aptitude for learning, and as an educator, you might be able to pick it up pretty quickly.
Maybe that'll be a summer project.
There you go. Is do one of those. They have these programs now that literally say that in a couple of months you're able to speak the language, and they use it for the State Department, and now it's available for anybody to use. So it's something to consider. As you're equipping yourself for this new season and this new location. So you two launched a publishing company.
Yes.
All right, and you've got some children's books out.
Yes.
All right, and how is that going for you?
Well, really, I think it's what I want it to be. And so I didn't create my books because I want to make $1 million. That's not the purpose. So we just did I did my first read aloud of Benny Gator, the children's book, on YouTube, the whole book for free. My dog Benny, who inspired it, is in it, and it's really to help kids with anxiety. And so we're going to start doing those, and I'm looking to start a different company called Spicy Kids Educational Services to help, families with understanding their child's disabilities and different strategies. And so that's a future project. And who knows, maybe someday the goal is for me to start my own school, which in Florida there are so many. I'm dreaming again in different kind of dreams.
So, we have stood with you, as you know, in prayer and stayed in touch with you all these years. And here it is, almost 4 years later, that we're back together again and still taking this journey together. And it's an encouragement. This is not a story of defeat. This is a story of encouragement to equip you, so that you go into a situation not with blinders on and uninformed as the Kahns did, because they didn't know what was around every corner. But because of Chrissie's attention to detail, because she's an educator, because she's a chronicler, because she's someone that keeps up with what's going on, she's been able to assemble and chronicle the journey and give you a resource that you probably can't find anywhere else, that navigates through the anticipated costs and the steps that you have to take at various steps along the way. So as you're considering your child acquisition options, whether or not it's through infertility services, whether or not it's through foster care or adoption, you need to know up front what it is that the journey you're embarking on, and the finances. And this is the quicksand of all of this. You can start out with enough money to go through the whole process, and then be disqualified from the process because the money you started out with isn't there anymore, and your net worth at the time of adoption is depleted because of the cost of adoption, and therefore you're disqualified. And that sounds like, whoa, what a wretched system. And the answer is, oh, what a wretched system. And you need to know these pitfalls long before you embark on them. When I was approached by an attorney, I was told straight up, you are the only client I have that can afford this adoption, because I had all the medical expenses, all the prenatal and postnatal care of both the child and the mother that I was having to agree to, and the housing and the feeding and the support for the first 3 months after the child was born, to care for the mother through the agency that was looking out for her. So these was not disclosed. It was just kind of presented to me in the lawyer's bills that came. And you need to be able to anticipate that as well. Chrissie Kahan, author of Baby Bankrupt. You did not get the baby. Money spent $34,725. You can get it by going to ignitingnation.com. Look at today's program lineup. You'll see her name, Chrissie Kahan, Kahan, and just click on it. It'll take you to the cover of the book. You click on the cover of the book, it'll take you right to buy it, and you'll check out right there. Chrissie, great to see you. Love to your husband. Glad to see the joy of the Lord is still on your face, in spite of all the obstacles that have been put in your path, and just continue to press on and be where God wants you to be.
Thank you. You as well, Eric. Good to see you.
Good to see you. God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.